Long before air conditioning existed, before wall thermostats, before the steady drone of compressors became part of everyday summer life, architects were already using the shape of buildings themselves to guide moving air. They created spaces that could feel 10, 15, sometimes even 20 degrees cooler than the outside temperature without motors and without consuming a single kilowatt hour of power. The most advanced form of that design carried a specific name. It was known as the Breezeway. One of the clearest examples stands at Taliesin West. Constructed in 1937 in the Sonoran Desert, where summer heat regularly rises above 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 43 degrees Celsius, the designer behind it understood a principle modern construction has largely abandoned. He understood physics and embedded it directly into the structure. To see how Wright approached Taliesin West, one concept matters above all others. In 1797, Italian physicist Giovanni Battista Venturi described what later became known as the Venturi effect. The principle is straightforward. When air, which behaves as a fluid, travels through a space that narrows, the flow must accelerate to preserve the same volume movement. Air drifting slowly through a broad opening suddenly has to compress into a tighter channel. As it speeds up, pressure drops inside that restricted zone. Then another effect appears. Nearby air is drawn inward. It rushes toward the lower pressure space, attempting to equalize the difference. Now imagine that narrowed passage is no longer a laboratory tube. Instead, it becomes a corridor between sections of a house. A gap framed by thick walls, an architectural feature carefully aligned with the prevailing wind direction, that becomes the breezeway. In its simplest version, a breezeway is merely a roofed connection between separate parts of a building. In early colonial American homes, it often separated the main residence from the kitchen outbuilding. The design served practical needs, while also channeling airflow. Mediterranean architecture used similar narrow passages between courtyard walls. In Middle Eastern mashrabia construction, carved wooden lattice systems produced a comparable effect in vertical form. But Wright pushed the idea further than nearly anyone else in American architectural history. At Taliesin West, the breezeway linking different sections of the compound was not simply a path for walking. It functioned as a deliberately engineered pressure system. Wright positioned the structure to capture prevailing desert winds, which during summer afternoons in the Scottsdale region arrived from the southwest. The airflow entered wider courtyard spaces at a slower pace. Then it encountered the narrow corridor. The air compressed. Its speed increased. By the time it emerged from the opposite side, it had transformed into a genuine moving breeze. Even during desert afternoons when the surrounding air feels motionless, wind speed changes human comfort more than most people realize. A breeze moving at 2 miles per hour in temperatures of 108 degrees Fahrenheit or 42 degrees Celsius still feels severe. That same air at 108 degrees Fahrenheit or 42 degrees Celsius becomes entirely different once it moves at 9 miles per hour. Against human skin, it can feel nearly 20 degrees cooler. The temperature itself has not changed. What changes is evaporation. Moving air speeds up the removal of sweat from the body, allowing the body's own cooling process to work far more efficiently. Wright did not rely on instinct alone. He tested it. He recorded the results. At Taliesin West, he modified the design continuously from season to season. Sleeping areas were relocated to capture more favorable wind angles. Canvas roof sections were shifted to redirect airflow. He adjusted the structure the same way a musician fine-tunes an instrument. Wright even described Taliesin West as a learning laboratory. He remained there during desert summers alongside his students and apprentices. Together, they experienced the strengths and weaknesses of the building in real time. If a room became stagnant and heavy with heat, he redesigned the openings. If a corridor pushed wind too aggressively, he expanded the walls little by little. This was not ornamentation. It was not simply visual taste. It was engineering. What many people fail to understand about breezeways is that the breezeway alone was never the complete solution. It was not some isolated trick that could be attached to any structure with guaranteed success. The system functioned because every component of passive cooling worked together at the same moment. Like an orchestra, each element depended on the others. The breezeway may have been the lead instrument, but the entire ensemble still mattered. The first requirement was orientation. Before construction even began, traditional builders needed to answer one essential question. Where does the dominant summer wind originate? Across much of the American Southwest and the southern states, summer airflow usually arrives from the south and southwest. Builders therefore positioned the longest wall, the side containing the greatest number of openings, toward that direction. Breezeway corridors were angled specifically to capture and redirect that moving air deeper into the structure. In the southeastern regions, such as Georgia, Alabama, and the Carolinas, breezeways in plantation-era homes and shotgun houses were positioned to intercept coastal winds arriving reliably from the southeast during the hottest afternoon hours. The house itself became a carefully aimed wind antenna. If the breezeway faced the wrong direction, the system failed completely. In some cases, it became worse than useless, trapping stagnant heat inside a dead air zone. The dog trot house, common throughout Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama, and much of the rural South from roughly the 1820s through the 1920s remains perhaps the clearest American example of breezeway construction executed correctly from the ground up. The design itself was uncomplicated. Two separate enclosed log or frame structures stood apart from each other. Between them sat an open-covered corridor known as the dog trot. That central opening was usually aligned east to west, allowing prevailing southern breezes to move directly through the middle of the structure. The passage itself became the living room. Families prepared meals on one side of the structure, slept on the other, and spent as much of the day as possible inside the breezeway itself. There, the shaded corridor combined with the Venturi effect to create something close to a natural air conditioner. In a properly positioned dog trot breezeway, temperatures could measure between 15 degrees Fahrenheit and 22 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than the surrounding open air. That equals roughly 8 degrees Celsius to 12 degrees Celsius lower only 20 feet away. But airflow alone was not enough. Pushing moving air through a heated building is no different than running a fan inside an oven. The heat still remains. It simply circulates. That is why the second part of the system depended on thermal mass. Builders used materials capable of absorbing heat slowly during the daytime and releasing it gradually after sunset. Adobe, the sun-dried clay brick used for thousands of years across the American Southwest, Mexico, and the Middle East, possesses a thermal lag of around 12 hours. Heat striking the exterior wall at noon does not fully reach the inside surface until approximately midnight. During daylight hours, while the breezeway pulls outside air through the structure, that airflow moves across walls, still carrying the coolness stored from the previous night. That combination changes everything. Moving air combined with cool surfaces creates interiors that remain genuinely comfortable even when outside temperatures rise beyond 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 38 degrees Celsius. At Taliesin West, adobe walls measured between 18 inches and 36 inches thick. The volcanic rock Wright, used throughout the rubble stone sections, shared similar thermal behavior. On a summer afternoon, reaching 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 43 degrees Celsius, the interior wall surfaces inside Taliesin West remained close to 75 degrees Fahrenheit or 24 degrees Celsius. Touch those walls and they feel almost cold. Now compare that to a typical wood-frame stucco house from the 1990s, using R13 insulation in the same desert climate. By 300 p.m. during a July afternoon, interior wall surfaces begin releasing stored heat back into the room itself. The air conditioner ends up battling the building. The third component involved shade and roof overhangs. Wright became famous for long horizontal roof lines stretching far beyond the walls. Those extensions cast deep shadows over windows and exterior surfaces during the high summer sun. This was not decoration. It was geometry. In the northern hemisphere, the summer sun reaches an extremely high position in the sky. In Phoenix, Arizona, the angle climbs beyond 81 degrees above the horizon during the summer solstice. An overhang measuring 18 inches to 24 inches can fully shade a south-facing window during peak summer heat, while still allowing the lower winter sun to enter for passive solar warming. The shaded wall never accumulates extreme heat. The air moving through the breezeway passes over a cool surface, strengthening the entire system further. Wright documented every part of this process. He mapped solar angles. He calculated roof extension depths. He wrote continuously about building orientation. Nothing about it relied on guesswork. He approached architecture as a complete thermodynamic system, where every part functioned together as one machine. That is the environment where the breezeway emerged from. Not a single clever hallway, but an entire passive cooling philosophy, integrated into every decision beginning with site selection itself. If you enjoyed this story, stay with us for more deep explorations into the forgotten engineering ideas that once shaped how people lived, built, and survived extreme environments. Please leave your thoughts about this content in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.